Thank you, Sam, for joining us. It's wonderful to have you on Jules FM. I thought it'd be a great place to start to hear about you, or Sam Mitchell, as a player to begin with. So, starting up, when you were growing up as a kid, did you always want to be a footballer, or was there something else you thought you might like to be?
Um, I, I mean, I grew up, playing all of the sports. It wasn't like I had a super sporting family or any of that sort of thing. So I played all the sports that were available. We lived very close to my primary school, so I was the kid waiting in the yard for everyone else to turn up with a basketball or a cricket ball or footy or whatever. Um, and so I played a lot of sport growing up, I guess, and I was best at footy. So in general, you like the things you're better at. So footy became passion pretty quickly.
Okay, and was there a moment in particular that you remember where you went, you know what? I love this so much. This is it. This is what I'm going to do for a living.
um, no, I think I was very. I mean, I think like most kids, I was quite naive to how difficult it was to play professional sport. So I just thought it was when I was sort of 10 or 12. I just thought it was a given. I'll play AFL. That'll be my life. But and when I was about 14, I went to a first representative team, and this coach, he was so genuine, and he really felt like he was saying something positive. He said, "You guys are so lucky. We're sitting in a room with, 70 or 80, 13 or 14-year-old boys, and we kind of knew each other from different teams we'd played and stuff. And I was nowhere near the best in that group. But in my mind, well, I was obviously playing AFL. I never did the math. And then he said, "You guys are so lucky to be sitting in this room. One, maybe even two of you are going to play AFL footy." And it was the first moment that it dawned on me, oh, it's not a given. So rather than remembering you are going to do it, it was probably remembering it might be harder than you think.
Yeah, right. And so, I mean, after that decision, then when you went, okay, I'm committed, and it could be a little bit more difficult though, did you ever have periods of doubt where you went, oh, I'm not good enough, this is not going to work out? And how did you manage that?
When I was going through my under 18 year, so the year 2000,
Yeah.
um, I had won the best and fairest year before at Eastern Ranges, and then I would win it again that year. But about halfway through the season, the draft combine invites came out, and 6 or 8 of my teammates were invited to go and train in front of the AFL clubs, and I didn't get invited. And it was the first moment when I said, "Oh, I'm not gonna make it." So I didn't get drafted at the end of that year. So my end of my first year, I was. No chance. I was not athletic enough and didn't have the right attributes that AFL clubs were looking for at the time. And that was a pretty tough period. I was finishing at 12, and dream was sort of stripped away. So at that point, I had an opportunity where I could have gone and played local footy and probably made a bit of money and done okay for myself. But your opportunity was away, or I could persist and go and play in the VFL. Box Hill had only just come into the league with alignment with Hawthorn. I think it was the second year.
Yeah.
So I went and played for Box Hill, and I played one full season there as a 19-year-old. And I was really fortunate. I had some great people that were around me, some great coaches. Um, David Parkin and Donald McDonald and these guys that were really huge, had huge impact on me. They committed to my learning journey, and at the end of that season, they pushed Hawthorn's hierarchy to draft me, which they did. So there was certainly some doubt through that period.
And so, like, what kind of self-talk did you have to go through then? Because it would have been easy to go, okay, I'm just going to play local footy or whatever. Like, how did you have any sort of like mental kind of practices that helped you get through that? Like, and to actually
Not
go, all right,
not
yeah, I'm going to stick at it.
Not deliberately. Like I wouldn't have known about. I didn't know what self-talk was in the year
Yeah.
in 2000. It's the olden days for the kids of today. So back then, I wouldn't have known what self-talk even was. But I was quite kind to myself, I guess. I was a persistent type, but I didn't understand what was required at the time. And I was a good learner. Like I believed, people who wanted the best for me, I believed what they said, and I tried to implement things that they encouraged me to do. And I was kind to myself, and I was perhaps, people that didn't believe in me, I didn't trust them, and I didn't believe them. And so I believed myself, almost almost in a naive way. I just believed I was good
Yeah.
enough, so it worked okay.
That's awesome. There must be like so many young people, there are so many young people who are hopefuls and want to make it into AFL and AFLW. Why then do you think you made it overall, like compared to some of these?
I mean, a few attributes that everyone makes it for. Usually, almost every player at elite level sport has something they can do that they're better than everyone else at, or they're very very good at. And
Nice.
I had a couple of physical attributes that limited me, but I also had a couple of physical attributes that I could do that no one else could. So I could kick on both feet. I was good in congestion and could win the ball. So I had a couple of things, and I spent a couple of years around the age of 17, 18 trying to develop my weaknesses.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you go to school and when you in most of our lives, what happens is if you get a C in English and an A in maths, they tell you got to work on your English. But really, in elite sport, the opposite's true. An A is not good enough. You have to get an A plus, and
Yeah.
an A plus plus. So
Yeah.
I got some advice around, your C, maybe try to get it to a B if you can, but really your A's got to be an A plus, and that's going to make the difference. And David Parkin gave me that advice. So when I think about why did I make it as a career, I had the right people giving me the right advice at the right time, and I was willing to do the work and learn. So I think when you have those couple of things on your side, that puts the odds in your favour. But there are no promises. I think the other thing I had was resilience. Whether that was physical resilience or mental resilience. It's a really corny saying, but
No,
no
not
matter
at
how many
all.
times you get knocked down, you just got to get up one more.
Absolutely. No, not corny at all. And I know, speaking of knockdowns, during your career, you had a couple of setbacks. I know you had the hamstring injury that sidelined you for like 8 weeks. And you had, you also had copped a fair bit of criticism when you were starting out, like too slow, I believe, and too small. Those sort of things must have been also challenging. How did you overcome those challenges?
I have these circles. I might even have it nearby, but these two circles about the things that matter and then the things you can control.
Yeah.
So if you think about anything you're worried about or stressed about, if you have no control over that thing, then there's no point spending time thinking about it. By the same, if it doesn't matter, then you've got to not think about it either. And if you think about criticism, particularly external criticism, does that matter? Then, well, the answer is no, it doesn't. It doesn't impact you unless you let it. Now, internal criticism from your coaches, things you need to improve from people that want the best for you, you really have to commit to fixing those and improving those things. Like, they're absolutely vital. So one of the challenges is around making sure that you are committed to fixing the things that need to be and improving yourself, but also being able to shut out the white noise of people who may or may not have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, absolutely. My husband always says control the controllables, and I think that's exactly what you're talking about. Worry about what is in your control. Tell me, has failure ever taught you something that the wins didn't?
Oh, of course, it's much easier. It's very difficult to learn from winning. Um,
Yeah.
when I was coaching, we had a close game a couple of years ago where we didn't handle the late part of the game very well, but we won, and we didn't review it particularly closely. And the next week we got into a very similar situation and we lost. And it was amazing the level of desire to learn. I always think of myself as a person that desires learning
Yeah.
and wants to improve. But when we had won, even though we hadn't handled a close game very well, I was quite, we wanted to move on, wanted to make progress in our game. We looked at some other things. And the next game we lost because we hadn't committed to the learning that was required. And it was a really good lesson on just the outcome. The outcome you may deserve, but sometimes you win when you don't really deserve to win. Sometimes you lose when you perhaps deserve to win. And being able to learn from wins is one of the things that the greats in any area, they learn from winning, and they don't shy away from the things that they didn't get right. It is quite easy to to win and then say, oh yeah, I got it all right, when you never do really.
No. So with that then, after a loss, what does that look like, that learning stage? Like, how do you break that down? Like, what's that process?
I sort of break our week up really clearly in my own mind. We have if you think about if it's just a 7 day game to game week for us, then we spend the first day and a half really feeling however you want to feel. Great if you win and horrible if you lose, and just accept the emotion and don't have to fight it, just accept how it is. But around 36, 48 hours later, you got to get back to the normal feeling and get back to, so if you come and see us 2 days after a game, you shouldn't know whether we won or lost the last game. The environment should be the same. And even emotionally, individually as a person, you need to be able to do that, to regulate your emotion and get back to that ideal position. So making sure that we do that. The first part of the week really is spent looking backwards. What can we learn from the game just gone? The middle part of the week is spent making progress collectively on whatever the direction you as an individual or the team needs to make. And then the final part of the week is in preparation for the next game. So really three quite clear phases. We sort of shut the review process at one point and do progress, and then we shut the progress and we do preparation. And then you perform on the weekend and all starts again.
And is that the process you used to follow as a player as well? That's how you used to break it down?
I didn't know that I was doing it,
Yeah.
but when you retire and you review things that worked for you and things that didn't, and when you start coaching and you start learning about other people, and you figure out, okay, you're preparing for this game, but you're still thinking about the last game, so it makes it a bit messy. So trying to give clarity to players. I mean, if you can create clarity, that can create confidence. And then if you can create confidence, that creates the feeling that you can and deserve to do well. So really, a lot of what you're doing in preparation, if you can prepare the players in any way, you are trying to give them clarity because that will create the confidence they need to perform.
Yeah, absolutely. As a player, pardon me, was there, and you mentioned one before, but were there any other mentors who had a really big impact on your career? And then did they have any advice that stuck with you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the great things about my life and the life of professional sport is you have so many great people around you who want the best for you.
Yeah.
So as far as mentors, I had an enormous amount of mentors who did a whole lot of great things for me. And I think one of the, whether that was players, so when I got drafted, I had, Shane Crawford, who was a great player at the time, who I learnt a lot of training standards and things from, or whether it was, in my studies, I had some mentors. I ended up completing an MBA just after I finished, and so those types of things you learn, and you meet all these different people from different walks of life, and certainly have hundreds of pieces of advice and quotes that dictate the way you try to live your life.
Yeah, and your favourite? Can you think of any offhand?
A couple that I use on a fairly regular basis is that there's no shortcuts to anywhere worth going. A basic one is work works.
Yeah.
So if you put in the work, then it'll pay you off, and it works over time. So those sort of things, they're the sort of commitment ideas and things that have dictated part of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. So a broad question, but how did you get the best out of yourself as a player?
There's a level of sort of curiosity about improvement. So as I sit here now, there's a couple of our first years sitting out just to my right. They're kicking the balls out there. They're discussing, football, and they're spending the time, and it just takes that. So I think willingness to learn. It's hard when you're young. I think you feel like you know a lot. I don't know if anyone, some of the people watching or listening will have teenagers in their lives, and those teenagers, they know everything. And the older you get, the more you realise you don't know. So we're all on a big learning curve, and being willing to learn and risk how silly you feel when you're trying to learn and you can't quite figure it out. I think all those things matter.
Absolutely. And so now, Sam Mitchell is a coach. What qualities do you think separates a good coach from a great coach?
I think a lot of emotional intelligence. So I think there's obviously your own self-control, emotional regulation, all those things are really important. But then ability to understand and have empathy for other people. One of the lessons I learnt, and you get told growing up to treat other people the way you want to be treated, but in coaching I wouldn't advise that. I would sort of say you need to get to know your people, get to know your players, and you got to treat them in the way they want to be treated. Some players need a lot of love and affection and time spent, and some players just tell me how it is and I'll go and do it. And there's no right or wrong way to be coached, but there's a right and wrong way for every player. And so working those things out, I think if you get that right, then the thing that all good coaches have is great players and great talent. So your job really is to maximise the talent that you have.
From your perspective, is there an attribute or quality that you've seen in players that separates those that maybe make it to those that won't?
I think that the first one, I didn't mean it to be a theme of this, but willingness to learn is, I think we have players who come in and they've been stars their whole childhood.
Your career, yeah.
And we have players that have been battlers and have been late developers. And where they start is very little reflection on where they finish in general. Not always. But if you are willing to learn, you commit to learning, and you have good self-awareness. It's very difficult to teach someone something that they think they already know. So if you have good self-awareness, you can take good feedback and you can try to improve. The other thing I would say, it's a bit corny as well, but around growth mindset. So if you think, oh well, I'm only this good and I can only work on it up to a point, then your commitment and your motivation to work on that thing is going to be lower. So if you believe, if I work hard on this, I can improve it, then that's going to motivate you for a lifetime. So I think having a genuine belief that no matter what you commit to, you can improve it.
Sam, you worked under Adam Simpson at the West Coast Eagles and Alistair Clarkson at Hawthorn. Were there any qualities or lessons that they taught that you now incorporate?
I think every leader has lots of different attributes, and so they're the two AFL coaches. But I also had Peter Schwalbe in my career. I've had a lot of coaches at different levels, all the assistant coaches over the years. And I think you take bits and pieces of everyone and you think about how that made you feel, how it made the teammates feel, and you implement some things and you don't implement others. Some things to avoid and some things to implement. But I think you have to put them through the filter of who you are. So if you start doing something because another coach did it, it won't feel like you. And I think what's important is you need to figure out what you want to be and who you want to be as a coach, and then keep everything through that filter. So if you want to be a hard-nosed coach, then you can't go and do other things because it'll lead to inconsistency. And I think the one thing that all players want from their coaching staff is consistency.
I think that's amazing advice, and everything and everyone I've spoken to keeps coming back to that. It's about finding who you are and your unique strengths and really working on those. So I love that perspective. Now, if you have a player that's underperforming though, and I know you've talked about connecting with them at their level, but if they're still underperforming, how do you manage that? Like, what approach might you take?
My favourite and least favourite quote is that if they haven't learnt it, you haven't taught it. So we sort of have a philosophy that it's 50-50 between the player and you. And I think what's really important is that we sort of think of every player a bit like a house plant. So if you've got a plant in the corner of your room and it's not thriving, it's sort of browning off on the leaves and it's not going well, you don't get annoyed at the plant. Like, it's not the plant's fault. There's something wrong with the environment it's in. Not enough light, too much light, not enough water, the pot's too big or too small, the fertilizers too much or not enough. And you think about every athlete is a bit like that. You have to create an environment for the individual athlete to thrive. And if a player isn't performing well, then you have to check and try all these things about what's the environment they're in that's enabling them that's restricting their growth, and how can you create a change of environment that will lead to a change of behaviour. So you work with the athlete about improving their environment, their behaviours and how they're performing. And if you can't do that, then you just keep working on it and persisting on it. And if it doesn't work eventually, then they won't survive and stay in the game. But over time, you have to realise it's the environment, particularly as the head coach, when you have so much say on the environment they're in. You can make or break and it's not just the physical environment. It could be who's coaching them, the way they coach them, the way they speak to them, their self-talk models, their mental skills, their physical ailments. There's all of the different aspects. So treating every player that 50-50, you're committed with them. They have to do the work. They have to be willing to improve, but you have to create an environment that's going to let them thrive.
That must be very that must be very tricky though, because as you said, you're identifying each player's needs and trying to meet them where they're at. And so if you're doing something and it's working for 99%, but then you've got one that the conditions aren't right, trying to find what that is, that's got to be tricky.
Firstly, I don't think there's anything that works for 99. I think they all,
That's true.
everywhere you go, every friend you have, every person that you interact with slightly differently according to the cues that they give you. And it's no different in a classroom or in a football club. You deal with some kids or players and you say, okay, he's engaging, he's an extrovert, he's going to be willing to ask questions in a meeting. And if I ask this player a question, that's just, all that is going to do is cause anxiety. That's not going to increase their learning. So you work out those cues pretty quickly, and there's a lot of resources. I mean, I think the thing we have is an enormous amount of resource around our players, and what that does is it creates time and space to work out. I don't have the answer for every player, and I can't do it on my own, so I have a whole group of coaches and staff and psychologists and dietitians and physios and doctors and an endless amount of people that can try to create the perfect environment for each individual athlete.
Speaking of psychologists, but not just psychologists, there are so many people that deal with this, but how important is mindset and resilience for your team, and how do you teach that?
Resilience is a funny one, because some players have had difficult lives, so they've got a lot of resilience. They get drafted and they've already been through, whether it's deaths or their parents splitting up or some difficulties in their life. In general, they have got some resilience because of something. They've had injury, for instance. And then you have some players who have been blessed, and good luck to them, but they haven't needed resilience up to that point. And that doesn't mean that they don't have it when those difficulties arise. But the building of resilience is one of the challenges, because you don't want players to go through difficulty, but when they do, there's such an opportunity there. So that's one of the things that we discuss, is how to build resilience in a safe way. Obviously, we do it through our training, making sure they're going to the edge and not too far in those types of ways. Mindset, we do a lot of work on mindset. I think as a coach, you're an unskilled psychologist, no different to being a teacher. You're forever working with how players think, how they talk, who they interact with, and the stories they tell themselves. Just looking at our first year players, they'll drive home at the end of their first week of an AFL experience, and they will tell themselves a story about how that week went. And that's going to dictate how they feel about themselves, that's going to dictate how they feel about the environment, and that's going to dictate their next week. So being able to have some assistance for them to make sure that the stories they're telling themselves are the right ones, that's all the things we work on.
Your sphere of influence has always been beyond the footy field. And can you talk to me about the fans, media, members of the community, and what kind of role model do you aim to be for younger players or fans watching from the sidelines?
This sounds like a funny thing to say, but I don't aim to be a role model, but I try to live. I believe that as basic as it sounds, the decisions you make in your life will dictate the life that you lead, and the decisions that I hope to make need to be consistent with my values, what I believe, who I would like to be. I look at all the people that I admire. And I think about what I admire about them, and I try to live slightly more like them. I look at the opposite, and try to avoid those things. And over time, if you're consistent in your desire to improve your values, your behaviours. You know, I think we all do things and think, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I would have handled that differently if I had my time again. If you continue to be honest with yourself and monitor how you would like to live your life, then people will perceive you, for the most part, how you are, not always. And if they don't, then you can't be too worried about that. But one of the things I admire about people is when they don't mind too much what other people think, because they believe in themselves and how they live. So if someone says, oh, he's a horrible person, if you think that, that's your choice, but I know that to me, I'm not, and I'm a good person. So I live my life in that way, which gives you a level of confidence that you can lead a life that you're proud of and your kids are proud of and that your wife is proud of. And if you do those things, then the way you're perceived from others that are beyond your direct, sphere, as a sort of public figure, you obviously have more impact and more eyes on you. I meet a lot of people, and they've met you many years before, and it's not rude, but you don't remember them because you've only seen them that one time, whereas they've probably seen you multiple times in that period. So, influencing more people is very secondary to what you're trying to do in your own inner circle.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think if you focus on being the best you can be in what you're doing, then that's the role modeling anyway, isn't it? So
yeah, I think you always want to be making progress. You always want to be improving what you're doing. You always want to live your best life, be your best self. All those corny lines.
yeah, that's very true though. So what advice would you give to any hopefuls out there who want to be an AFL or AFLW player?
Oh, be the best at something. Work on your strengths. If you get an hour of training, probably do 40 minutes of working on the thing you're really good at, and still spend that 15, 20 minutes working on some deficiencies. I think getting a feedback loop is really important. I think finding someone who you trust to tell you the truth, not what you want to hear. I can run a meeting. I've got 3 or 4 people that work here that they'll say the meeting was great, regardless of how the meeting is. And I've got 3 or 4 people that I know I can go to and say, what do you think? And they're going to give me honest feedback. Didn't think you nailed this, thought you spoke for too long on that, moved around too much, were distracting, didn't think your slides were clear enough, this is what you could do next time. And then I believe them, I trust that they want the best thing for me, so I take that feedback on board and I know that's going to help me. So if you want to improve, find someone who you trust wants the best for you and you trust their opinion, and then be willing to listen. I think feedback's vital in your path to improvement. And they teach us feedback's like a plate of food. Like if someone offers you a plate of food, you always say thank you, but you don't have to eat it all. Like you don't have to take every piece of feedback and implement it. But I think if you can create strength-based learning, strength-based environment, get good mentors, get people who will tell you the truth and be committed to learning and improving yourself, then they're what I would say are the key pillars to success in the sporting environment, but probably for any environment really.
Yeah, but I would 100% agree with you, Sam. So final question, could you distill into 3 words what you would like your legacy to be, or how you'd like to be remembered when you are finished with football?
No, I don't think I can put that in 3 words.
Need more words? Take as many as you like.
So legacy and how I'd like to be remembered.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really think about it. If I'm really honest, I don't think. When I played my 300th game, I reflected on my career for maybe a day or two, my playing career. But I'm not much of a backwards looker. I'm always sort of a forward thinker, looking forward ahead, and I'm sure one day down the road I'll think about legacy and all those things. But at the moment, that's far from my mind. I've got too many things to do in front of me.
No, that's absolutely fine. Well, Sam, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure and so much invaluable advice you've just shared with us there. So I really appreciate it.